The room to me feels like a school project. Yeah, like when you're in high school, we're all assigned to work on this project together. But there's always like one person who's doing kind of the leading of it, and then we all do our part. It was a totally different creative energy. Like the showrunner job to me felt more like what I was doing when I was making sketches. You feel like you're making those kind of decisions. As a writer, you're more just like, how do I go in this room with these people and we figure out these stories to tell that the showrunner's expressing that they want us to tell. Yeah.
I'm Charla Lauriston, a stand-up comedian, writer, director, and producer, and this is the Working Writer Podcast, where screenwriters, creatives, and industry insiders share their stories of breaking in hopes that it helps you along your path. I'm so excited you could join us. If you like what you hear, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Without further ado, let's get to work. Welcome to the Working Writer Podcast. I am Charla Lauriston, and I'm excited to introduce you to today's guest, Lamar Woods. Lamar is a writer, actor, and musician from Atlanta, Georgia. His writing credits include Survivor's Remorse, New Girl, and Single Parents, and his 2018 film It's a Party, directed by Weldon Wang and starring Ego Nwodum, Carl Tart, and Tone Bell, is available on Apple TV and Amazon Prime. I worked with Lamar on season 1 and 2 of Grand Crew, and not only is he one of the funniest and nicest people I've ever worked with, he's also an artist through and through. Lamar dropped his R&B album Wine Bars while we were in the Grand Crew writer's room, and I gotta admit, it's fire. My favorite song on there is Wine and Tapas, and I highly suggest you check it out. And while you're at it, you might as well also check out Grand Crew. Season 2 is airing right now on Fridays at 8:30 on NBC and streaming on Peacock. In this episode with Lamar, we talk about his journey from Atlanta to the writer's room and how he makes his creativity a priority. I love this episode, and I hope you do too. Take a listen. Lamar Woods, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up? That's the introduction. Ain't got no credits and
That's
nothing.
the introduction. Nah, we don't got to do that. I'll do the credits
I thought
at
you
the
was
beginning.
gonna set me up like, yo, this man's been all over the world.
I'm gonna do a professional introduction. Haven't you ever listened to a podcast?
No, I don't know how these things work.
You introduced the guests before. You introduced them on your own.
You do it, and then I just pop in. Like I pop in.
Exactly. You know, like I'll do a separate recording. I'm going to leave all of this in the show, too. I'll do a separate recording where I say, Lamar Woods is a friend of mine, and he's done this. He's done New Girl. He's great. And then we cut to Lamar Woods. Welcome to the show.
Oh, okay. That's more like an NPR intro. That's how they do it on NPR.
I'm a professional.
It's like a beautiful, soft voice.
Absolutely.
Like,
that's exactly what I want.
This. Podcasts I be doing it be like, yo, it's crazy. We got a crazy guest. You guys ready? And then it's like, and then we just walk. Yeah, have stuff on the show.
You know what's so funny is that I've done so many of those podcasts that now I'm like, asking people to be on this podcast, but I'm saying no to other podcasts because I'm like, you know what, they're really annoying. So thank you.
Podcasts are tough. Like I gotta admit, like I think I prefer them during the weekend because I'm just like working during the week, and then when I do a podcast, it just like stops my day. I have to like stop my day to do this thing, and then I'm like exhausted after. And it's like it doesn't seem to like line up, but everybody wants to do them during the week now. I don't know why. We got to do them on the weekends.
Yeah, I mean, I'm currently not working, so I can do it during the week.
Yeah.
I schedule time for it, of course. I block off time.
You're fine. I'll do anything for you. You're my best friend.
Lamar, I really appreciate you.
You're my best friend.
You're a good friend of mine. I don't know best, but...
Yeah, but man, I thought we was that. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm like top. I'm like
no,
the
you're
top.
You're top. You high level. You high level. You high level. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. So, what are you working on?
I'm the co-EP of your friends.
You are
right now. I've been working from home on a pilot, so I'm in development right now, doing that, but not anything specific in the room right now. But doing that and a couple movie features and stuff. It's been kind of chilling. And we just finished. I just finished Grand Crew with you last year. Yeah. That's going to premiere next month.
Yeah, in March, it looks like the premiere date.
Yeah. Then you can kind of chill out, take a nap and stuff. And then
take a little nap, see how they do.
Yeah. What made you want to do this?
Several reasons. One reason is because I started a course for aspiring TV writers, and I felt like I'd been having mentors come on to do monthly like mentor sessions, but they're exclusive to people in the course. And I was just like, these mentor sessions I think are very valuable. And I feel like it could just be a podcast. Like it could just be something that you don't get the one-on-one interaction like you would if you were in the course, but you'll still get the information. And absolutely there's other places to get the information.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's that many shows where TV writers talk to other TV writers. I don't know if there's that many opportunities for people to actually interact and engage with working writers. And I think it's really important.
No, I think it's great. I didn't know a lot about TV writing until I moved to LA, until I was already out here.
Yeah.
There was this one show that I saw that the guy from Community was doing. It was called Inside the Writer's Room. He would have like showrunners on there. And I remember being like, oh, this is the most helpful thing I've ever seen. Because you don't really know how this job works until you're in it, until you do it. And then you're like, oh, okay, I wish I kind of like had some idea. Or unless you watch 30 Rock, but then 30 Rock is like a comedy show. So you're like, that doesn't really help me.
Even then, like a lot of times it's like you're listening to people at showrunner level, which is a very different level from when you're trying to get in. And it's helpful, of course, to listen to showrunners, but I'm just like, what about the middle? What about the beginning? Like who's guiding people through that? That's really the purpose of it.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course. You're one of my favorite writers. And, I've been lucky enough to be in a room with you. So I've gotten to like watch you work.
Oh, cool.
Which has been great. You have such great instincts when it comes to comedy. I think you have great instincts when it comes to story. We met in the room, but I remember like during the time that I've known you, you've taken some time away from the writer's room to focus on your own work. And I wanted to jump in with that because I feel like we'll get to the other stuff because I just feel like we're in the time of the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
And I'm just like wondering what led you to that decision to take a step back to work on your own stuff.
Right.
Yeah. What led you to that?
I tried it. The time that you're referring to, I actually took that time off, but I did try to do it before COVID happened and I was like freaking out. Then I had to go back to work. When I first moved to LA, I was producing a lot. I had this sketch show called Northside Comedy where me and my best friend, we would make sketches and then put them online. And I think that routine of ownership, having idea, putting it out, I got so comfortable with it. We were putting out sketches like every month. And even though they were just sketches, it was like fully from my mind. It was like a filter of like, this is in my heart, this is in my mind, this is what I want to execute. I put it on, I get the audience response to it, it goes viral, and it's like, this is a success. Going into the writer's room doesn't leave a lot of free time for that kind of stuff. And you're like, I'm more of a soldier for this showrunner, which is a skill that I have as well. I felt like that other skill that I was building before that was like sort of diminishing a little bit because I was just like not making shit. And I was like, you know what? I just felt like I can't do both, like I have to try to at least take a step back. Because, you're in a writer's room, and the thing about being a writer's room is like you start making money, you want to like keep that up. You want to keep that lifestyle up. And I'm like, I need to try to do this now before I end up just doing this the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Like, I tried to do it after I worked at Single Parents, which was a great show, but it was never the right time. But I was like, okay, I think I could do this now. I took time off. I told my boss, I was like, all right, I'm not coming back. Literally, that was like December 2019 or whatever. It was like
right before the pandemic.
Like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh man, I think I should probably get back to work.
How interesting.
Yeah.
Wait, so during the pandemic, when a lot of work stopped, you decided to go back to work because you were nervous about not working during that time because of all the uncertainty.
I got kind of lucky because I had got an offer to work on a show. We didn't know the world was going to shut down yet. It was just like the showrunner hit me up like, hey, I think I'm going to do one more season of this show. Do you want to be a part of it? And we had kind of ran into each other a few times. And I was like, not really sure because I was like, I'm trying to do my own thing right now. But then once the pandemic started happening, they were like, oh, we're going to go on Zoom. And I was like, you know what? And I'm like incredibly anxious. And I think the end of the world is always happening. So I was like, you know what? I better not take this time. Also, you just don't know what's going to happen. So I was like, oh, this is a good opportunity. So I hit him up and I was like, yeah, put me in. So then I just happened to get a job right as the pandemic was happening, which like saved me because I was like, If I didn't have that, I probably would have lost my mind probably because I was completely
Right.
isolated by myself. So that was me having a place to go every day on Zoom. It was like maybe 4 or 5 months. After that, then Grand Cruga happened. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to Grand Cru. So
Mm-hmm.
by that point, I was like, man, I've been trying to take this time off. And it's almost been 4 years now. So then I was
Wow.
like, all right,
Wow.
after this, I'm taking it. To be fair, I like had a lot of prep time, of emotional prep time to really do it. And like,
Yeah.
and by that point, I was like really like dead set on doing it.
So do you feel that the time was well spent? Do you feel like you need more time? How long did you take, by the way?
It was not well spent at all. I didn't do it. I didn't do anything. No, but to be honest, actually, you helped me with this because we actually had a dinner, I think, right when I was in the middle of it, and you were saying like, don't put the pressure on yourself to like make all this stuff.
Oh man, I don't even remember that.
Oh, I remember it well. Eating pasta, spaghetti. I had a salad, and they put pickles in the salad.
Nice.
I thought that was weird, but then I was like, this tastes good. But you said, it's really more about the mental aspect. And from that dinner, I kind of decided to change course. I was writing a lot, but most of what I was doing was just mental clarity stuff. I was traveling a lot and like by myself. I would take a lot of trips and
Nice.
write in different locations. Like I wrote like 3 different scripts during that time. Like I wrote like a few
Damn.
movies and a bunch of stuff. I ended up going back to the room anyway because I was like, I was just like getting worried about. The thing is like you only have so much money to like do something like that.
Absolutely.
It's hard for me as a writer, especially when you get more upper level, to be on a show and split focus. Like if I'm like on your show, I'm gonna work hard for the showrunner. It's hard for me to like do that and have these projects that I'm like really excited about, and they're not getting enough attention. It's just gonna make me feel tormented a little bit. I appreciated it because I was like, now I have these scripts, and now if I go into a room, I have these projects that I worked on and I'm passionate about, and they're ready to go and they're ready to be read. So that's kind of how I felt about it.
I love it. I think that's such an interesting thing that happens that, you have to be a producer, I feel like. You have to be a maker, a creator of things to get the attention of writers' rooms for the most part.
Yeah.
Even if you're not like somebody who like creates sketches and puts them up, you still have to like write scripts and like be able to write a script to be in a writer's room. But the actual job of a writer's room is really so much more about doing what the showrunner needs.
Yeah.
Supporting the showrunner as much as possible. So you really do have to use a different part of yourself to be good in the room.
Right.
It's 2 different skill sets. It's like one skill set to be a creator, to be a performer, if you're a performer, to put out work. And then like you do have to use a different part of your brain to be in the room.
The room to me feels like a school project. Yeah, like when you're in high school and it's like we're all assigned to work on this project together. But there's always like one person who's doing kind of the leading of it, and then we all do our part. Yeah, it was like a totally different creative energy. Like the showrunner job to me felt more like what I was doing when I was making sketches, right? Like that you feel like you're making those kind of decisions.
Right.
As a writer, you're more just like, how do I go in this room with these people? We figure out these stories to tell that the showrunner's expressing that they want us to tell. Yeah. Which is fun too in its own way.
Absolutely. It is. But it is interesting that like that creative side of you, that producer, director part of you still needs to be fed with your own work. Because I have felt the exact same way. Like I have felt like I really needed to take some time to like just make something. Because I just like, sometimes I just need to make something.
Yeah, because you forget why you're doing it. Like, because, the worst thing that can happen is like, when the writer's room starts to feel like a job, like a 9 to 5 a little bit, you're like, this is not what I thought it would be. We're like supposed to be just being creative for a living, but then it starts to turn into like the Fred Flintstone, like clock in, clock out kind of thing.
Right.
And you're like, this don't feel fun anymore. Like,
yeah. I mean, I actually wish that people talked about the writer's room more like that, because it is a job. It is a date. It is a 9 to 5 or a 10 to 6 or whatever it is. That is what it is. And absolutely you have to be creative, but you have to be creative in a very kind of like a machine a little bit. You have to contribute a lot of ideas, and you are creative, but it's just much more on a job kind of level.
Yeah. It's so much more volume to like a volume of
Yes,
ideas.
it's
Like
a lot of
yeah,
volume.
like
Yeah.
I'm pitching so, and I think that was the most shocking thing to get, the first thing to get used to when I started in the room was
Yeah.
I'm gonna pitch a lot of ideas that are never gonna get on TV or never gonna be a part of the show.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh wait,
Yeah.
so you just want me to say stuff just so other people can think of other ideas, and then you're
Right.
like, oh, okay. It is like a factory, like, and
Yeah.
it doesn't mean it
Yeah.
can't be fun, but it's just like this way of writing. It's totally different from writing your own stuff because
It's just totally different.
when you're writing your own script, you already kind of have a point of view and what you want to say.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's funny because now when I write my stuff now, after being in the room for so long, I am like writing a bunch of ideas and picking the best one or whatever.
Totally.
But like that just feels like a symptom of being in the writer's room for so long.
Absolutely.
It feels like a job, but if they try to make it fun because there's bean bags everywhere, it's like, oh, let's sit in this bean bag. And then you're like, okay, this isn't a real.
Yeah.
But, you're going to an office every day. You have an office.
are.
You have to show up on time. You can't just be like walking in when you want to.
It's a real job. I feel like I had to like really learn how to be a professional staffer, basically.
Yeah.
And when I started in the room, I was so quiet. I think it's like any new writer. Like I was overthinking every idea because every idea had to be great. I wasn't thinking about the fact that this is about volume, not about like a perfect idea. And even if you do come up with a great idea, even if they put it on the board, even if it's in the mix, it still might not make the final thing. I would get so attached to my ideas. I would be like, this is the greatest idea. If I give this gem to you, you better use it.
Yeah.
At the very least, it taught me to not be so precious about every single idea. Like every single idea is not going to be the thing, which you do learn a lot about being less precious. You just get a sharper editorial eye when you're looking at your own scripts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely a different part of your brain. I think that's a good thing to know going in so that you can prep yourself.
That's the one thing. When I see younger writers, staff writers come in, it's like we all seem to have struggle with that.
Yeah.
We're like keeping score. It's almost like you got put on a team and you're like, man, I've only got this one shot.
Yeah.
If I just get this one joke in,
Right.
they won't fire me. I did exactly that. I was really quiet too. My first job, I didn't talk at all, like, because I didn't really understand what was happening. And I was like, it wasn't like I worked in a writer, like I didn't work as an assistant or anything.
Same.
So I didn't know what
I came
this
in
job
fresh.
was.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay.
I didn't know what the job was either.
Which is the first day it was so embarrassing. Like the first day, it was my first day in my first room. The showrunner and the executive producer and it was like lunchtime and we were eating Thai food. I was like the last person to leave to get my food. And then like the showrunner and the executive producer were kind of like talking real serious about the season. And then I was like trying to get out of there. And then like I just spilled all of the Pat CU all over the floor. And it was like, they didn't laugh or anything. They literally just looked at me and then like went back to their conversation. And I'm just, while they're talking about this serious conversation about their season, this amazing television show, I'm just like on the floor picking up this like Pat CU.
Scooping up Pat CU.
I was so embarrassed. And then like from that point, I was like, I'm not talking, I'm not doing anything. And I didn't talk at all.
Yeah.
To be real with you, like the only reason I ended up not getting fired is because this particular showrunner liked to have us put jokes physically in the script, like write them in, as opposed to pitching them verbally. So gave us the FDX file, and I just went ham in there and like just threw a shit ton of jokes in there. And he read it. He came in my office and he's like, "Yo, where's this guy?" And that kind of gave me the confidence of like, okay, he thinks I'm funny. I can pitch stuff in the room, but I had to do it on my own, kind of like quiet. Because, when you're writing by yourself, you can do whatever.
Absolutely.
It's not as like scary.
Yeah.
If I never had that experience, I think I wouldn't have like got the courage to actually like pitch vocally. Because, there's a lot of people in the room and they're really confident and have a voice. But I'm like you, I was trying to think of the best thing to say. Or I'm like very meek and humble, so I don't want to like step on anybody's toes. Yeah. And a lot of times you have to kind of like interrupt people if you really want to get your idea out. It's very challenging, especially as when you're first starting. But I was glad that happened because after that I was like, okay, I'm a little more confident now, which is crazy.
I did not have that experience.
You didn't spill Thai food everywhere?
I didn't spill Thai food, but my first room, I was so quiet, of course, because it's my first room. I know what's happening. I don't know what my job is.
And they don't tell you. It's not like they give you like a
They don't tell you either. Nobody talks to you.
Yeah.
Exactly. Nobody tells you anything. You're just supposed to figure it out. Or you're supposed to have been so interested that you had already looked it up.
Right,
Knew what
right.
to do. I didn't know anything. But I remember my first room when I finally did get the balls to talk, it was because we were talking about a new show on the air. And it was like a comedian that got a network show. And I love this comedian, but I hated the show.
Yeah.
You know, I always like to give a hot take. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, I got my 2 cents. I was like, oh, I can contribute to this conversation. I have 2 cents. Because I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated the show.
I could go in on this.
I could go in on this. I pipe up. I start talking about how much I hate this show. And then my showrunner walks out of the room. And then another writer tells me that my showrunner ran that pilot.
Oh, wow. Oh, no. Charlotte,
and that was his show. He directed. I was like, I literally was stunned.
Yeah.
I was mortified.
Yeah.
You know, when you're just not reading the room, everybody falls silent when I'm shitting on this show.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
That's funny.
I don't think I talked again for like another month or something like that. Or
Yeah.
I don't think it was really a month, but like it took me a long time to feel like I could say anything.
Right.
I felt mortified.
That's really funny. Yeah, like you don't realize it's like you in this room with these people and you find out, man, they worked on everything you've ever watched.
They're on everything.
Like,
Absolutely.
The first show I worked on, like all the guys, they all came from 30 Rock and stuff. I was like, oh man, I watched that show. Like this is crazy. Like I'm like hanging out with people who worked on these shows. Yeah,
it's crazy. It's cool.
It's fine. You did all right. He didn't get mad. He didn't get too mad.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to take a little break. And then when we come back, I want to ask you how you got into comedy and then how you got into your first writer's room.
Okay.
I'm quickly interrupting this episode to tell you about theworkingwriter.com. It's a resource I created for screenwriters and creative entrepreneurs that includes a blog, a course, and this podcast. Right now, when you sign up for the mailing list, you'll get my free guide to breaking into television. It's everything I've learned about breaking in, and it's basically what I've said to any writer who's asked to pick my brain over coffee. If you're working on breaking into TV, I hope it gives you some concrete steps to get to the next level in your journey. Go to theworkingwriter.com and sign up for the mailing list now to download your free guide to breaking into TV. Now, back to the episode.
Hey, what's up? That was a crazy break. Oh, man, I got so much done during that break.
I want to hear your origin story. How did you figure out you wanted to do comedy? Where were you in your life? Tell us the story. Take us on the journey.
Okay, it starts on this planet called Krypton. I'm from Atlanta. You know, I was a musician for a long time. I had a band in Atlanta that was kind of like I played guitar and I was rapping. And it was like this really cool, like gym class hero style band where we would do half rock, half rap music. This is right after I graduated college. I had got my degree in the study of religion, which I don't know what that was going to do for me. So I was kind of like lost. At that point, Atlanta was becoming like all like trap. That was when like Future was coming out. And like the music I was doing was just not popping in Atlanta. And I was like kind of feeling discouraged a little bit. So Weldon was like, my homie Weldon, that's his name. He wanted to be a filmmaker. So he was like, I'm going to LA. If you want to come. I figured maybe LA's music scene is a little more eclectic just because it's a bigger scene. So I was like, yeah, I'll go out there, try music out there. I came out here, no interest in comedy at all. Like I had no interest in doing that. I knew I was kind of a funny person, but I didn't really like think of it as a career. And then I had this band out here for like the first year. We were like a folk band. It was like me and this married couple. The husband played bass and the wife played drums. It was like so random. And then I was leading it and we would like play all these venues, but they would fight all the time. So I had to like, I was like, it was just super awkward. I was just like, all right, I don't want to be in the middle of it. I felt like I was like a child. Like I felt like I was in like a weird family band, you know? So I kind of stopped that. And then my homie Weldon was like, he wanted to get some practice filming people and he knew I could perform just as a musician. I had some level of stage presence. So he would just put me in sketches and we would just kind of shoot them around. And that became like the sketch site I was telling you about before. We did like 4 of them, didn't have any views. And then one of my friends just submitted it to World Star Hip Hop and it just like went viral. And then we were like, oh shit.
Wait, when you were posting them, it was just on YouTube initially?
Yeah. This is the old days too when like, I'm talking like before TikTok, all that shit. Like there was only like 3 sketch teams at the time. It was like Derek Comedy, Good Neighbor, and us. And we were like the black one, like Like our shit was like all black.
Man, Good Neighbor is from a long ass time ago.
Man, this
I'm like
is
trying to
way back.
even remember who was on it.
Yeah, that's like with Beck Bennett, and they're all like on the SNL and
Oh
stuff.
shit. Yeah.
It shit is crazy, like, because I was a huge fan of them, but we were like watching their stuff because a lot of the black stand-ups were like interested in performing, like acting, and we would just go to the Comedy Union all the time, which is this black stand-up club in LA, and just like find people we like and be like, you want to be in these sketches? We would just put them in and just write with them. And it became super fun, and I really liked it. Once it went viral, we were like trying to keep up with the audience, and we just started doing it a lot, and that's how we kind of got really into it. I had not done music in like almost a few years at that point. And I was like, oh man, I guess I'm like a comedian now. And I was like, maybe I should try to learn how to do it. And that's when I went to UCB to try to like take sketch and acting classes just to like get better at it. And I'm a big Donald Glover fan, and I knew that he went there. I did that, and I performed there for a long time and met a lot of people. And one of the writers I met, he was like our sketch coach, which crazy enough ended up being the showrunner of Grand Crew later in life, which is why. It feels, it's like a movie.
You know, Phil was in one of my first sketches too. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, really?
Just shout out to Phil Augusta Jackson.
Yeah, Phil Augusta Jackson, changing lives out here.
Changing lives out here. I was like early on in UCB in New York, and I had bought a chicken suit for Halloween, and I was like, I want to use this in a sketch.
Yeah.
I hardly remember it now. Like I did this stupid sketch about like eating me. I have no idea what I was.
Are you eating
really
me?
bad?
What's eating you?
Yeah.
Like, what's eating you? What's eating you? I know that.
It was terrible. Phil was great. He was in it.
Yeah. But no, he was the homie, and we became really close. I actually did this thing called CBS Diversity Showcase. And there was like this big hype. At the end of it, you're like going to have all these meetings. Or, you know, like you're supposed to meet all these industry people. And I met all these people, and they kept asking for like a sample. And I was like, I don't have that. And I was like,
what's that?
Like, what do you mean? I thought the showcase was a sample. You just saw my sketch on the stage.
Right.
And then they were like, no, we need something to read, homie. And I was like, all right, well, so I decided to write this pilot. And then I just happened to send it to Phil to just give me notes. But he was literally like, I just got hired to work on another show, because he was working at a show at the time, this show called Survivor's Remorse. And he just like passed it to the showrunner. It was like a real Hollywood situation. Like I literally had to quit my job. Like I was working a day job. I took this meeting with the showrunner. Shout out to Mike O'Malley, the amazing, crazy, like legend, this guy. And I'm meeting with him. I'm thinking, I don't know how to do an interview. Like, I'm like, how do you do this? Like, because we're just in there talking. But I guess I'm doing a good job because I'm just we're just talking about life. And this show happened to be very easy for me to connect to, because it was about a black dude around my age who was like living in Atlanta. So I was like, oh, this is like me. So it wasn't hard to like connect with the showrunner on this subject. I got hired right after that, like after I left the meeting, and they were like, we're starting on Monday, like that
crazy.
Monday. And I had to like just quit my job.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I told my boss, I was like, I got to go do this. This is what I've been wanting to do.
Of course.
That was my first gig. And then,
That's crazy.
I've been pretty much working ever since then, honestly. Yeah.
Phil helped you get your first job? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Look at Phil out here hiring people.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, you know, that's like the kind of thing that you don't see coming. It's not like I sent it to him like, help me get into the room. I literally was just like, he's a professional writer. He knows how to do it, so maybe he'll give me good feedback. And I think a lot of times people think you have to like kind of force your way in. And I'm like, a lot of times it's just like, it's usually your friends who are just already aware of you, and they're already probably thinking about you like all the time, but they haven't had the opportunity yet. And it was just a timing thing where he was like, it's like right when the person was asking probably him, like that he needed another person. And it was like, that worked out for me.
But there's also the fact that you had a sample. You know, you had something for Phil to be able to pass on. You know, like when those execs were asking you for a sample before, you didn't have it. And good for you, you put one together. And then when the opportunity came, you had something to show. It goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
You know, it helps if you're a part of some community where people know who you are and what you can do.
Absolutely.
A lot of times people want opportunities, and it's just like, but what can you do? I feel like they think the friendships and the networking comes first, but I think it's both. You should have some community of people, because there's no like LinkedIn for Hollywood.
Right, right.
There's no like job board where you can get a writer's room job. So you definitely need to network and know people. But at the same time, like, what do you have to show? If you have nothing to show, then nobody knows what you
Yeah,
can do, and
absolutely.
nobody can help
It's
you.
like people tell me they want to be a writer all the time and they like don't write. Like they're not writing.
Yeah.
Like, do you want to be a
Yeah.
writer or do you want to just be in a room? It sounds like you
Right.
just want to be in a writer's room. And a trick I'll just drop this gem for people, if the younger people are listening. One of the things that helps me, this is just something I do when I send scripts out. If it's somebody who's like on that level, like at that time, if it was like a working writer, I have like a list of people I send stuff to. It's sort of like a circle. Like my first draft, it goes to these 4 people that I trust who aren't really working, but they're people that like I wouldn't embarrass myself if they read like garbage or whatever. So from that pass, I send it to another group of people who are like a little more I trust as writers or whatever. And then like Phil was like the last person I sent this to. So by the time it got to him, it was already ready to go. Like, and I think when he read it, he was like, this is good. It probably surprised him. I think a lot of times people will send me something that's like not ready to be read. And it's like, you kind of waste that time with them. It's like, don't send me your rough draft. Send me the thing that you think is perfect.
Right.
I can't just give that rough draft to somebody or pass that on to anybody. Yeah. That made a difference because I think he was probably surprised how ready to go it was to be like just read by a showrunner.
Well, how did you get it ready to go? Because this was your first sample, right?
Yeah.
Was there a course that you took? Was it reading a bunch of other scripts? Like, what was it that got that script in shape?
It's not that I haven't written before. I had written like movies and stuff before that. I had written most stuff with my writing partner, the guy I came out to LA with. This was the first time I was just writing something by myself. I had a manager at the time too who was helping me, like, so I would send it to her. One of the things that, to be honest, like that helped me was I just wrote a pilot that was like very specific to my personal experience. And it just made it easier because I wasn't really out of my depth. Like I grew up the son of a high person in the church. The show was about a kid his dad was a pastor. So it was like, oh, this is making this show very easy for me to see. But I didn't know it was like, I wasn't like, I was like, this is amazing. But I knew what I was writing was readable, and like that somebody would like enjoy it. But I didn't know it would like get me a job at all. Like I didn't know that was going to happen. But you never know.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wait, so you didn't take any courses or anything? You were just writing with your partner and then you wrote this sample?
Fuck school.
Fuck a class.
Fuck a class. Look, I've never taken a pilot write. The only thing I've ever taken that was writing-wise was like sketch writing classes. But I've never taken any type of screenwriting class or anything like that. I learned how to use Final Draft on my own. But a lot of that stuff is like funny to me because it's like there's certain things you learn when you actually get hired in a room. You're bending to the will of how the showrunner writes. For example, like this is a very small thing. When I worked at New Girl, like Liz, when she does the scene heading, she does periods between it. And like I'm used to doing dashes, but it's like...
Right. That would be a giant pet peeve.
I don't think one's right or wrong, but it's like now I'm doing because she's the showrunner.
Yeah.
We just doing that now.
I'm doing periods. Yeah.
I'm not really sure what I would have really learned that wouldn't have just immediately unlearned when I started working. But that's not to say we shouldn't take classes. I know classes are a good thing too, but that's just not how I do it.
Classes are good. I mean, basically you're pretty much self-taught.
Yeah.
At least for me, I think like script structure doesn't come that easily. But it sounds like you're just very talented, Lamar. Okay?
Some people are just born with it. No, I think, honestly, I didn't know what I was doing. You know what I mean? Like, here's the thing. I really believe this. I'm going to be real. I think the interview is what got me the job over my sample. I think that interview is super important. They don't really think you're a good writer. You know what I mean? Like, because ain't nobody coming in at a staff writer level blowing the showrunner away with their sample. It's like, oh, this is like the best.
Don't undercut yourself.
Yeah.
If your sample gets you a meeting, then like it's good enough. And of course it won't be amazing.
Yeah, it's good, but it's not hitting all the like aspects of what a writer should know how to do.
Yeah.
I'm sure that the act breaks were all over the place and like stuff like that. But what he can tell is that this person knows how to execute an idea in their head or whatever.
Absolutely. This person has a point of view. This person understands dialogue. This person understands story at a fundamental basic level.
Story was very hard for me for a while. I think I didn't really understand story until I started working at New Girl because that was a 22 episode show. So we had to break story a lot. When it's like that long of a season, you're like constantly re-breaking and breaking story. And I didn't know how that shit worked. I didn't know how act breaks work. I didn't know any of that shit. And I was just like learning from that. And then I was like kind of like absorbing it. I guess I say that to say like nobody should feel like they have to know everything before they go in because I think I learned more after I got my first job. Like I learned about how writing really works. The only thing I kind of knew before that was like how to execute an idea that's I feel personally attached to and put it in script form.
Yeah.
Which was actually probably the most important thing.
For sure.
Everything else you can kind of learn, you know. But yeah.
For sure. Talk about that survivor's remorse interview. What do you think went so good about it?
I don't know.
What was it about it?
I think I just followed the flow of conversation. Like I didn't really understand what we were going to talk about, but it was like, okay, we're talking about Atlanta for a little bit. And then we're talking about basketball. Because I was like, this show's about basketball. I like basketball. I like sports, but I don't know a lot about sports. And like, I was like so nervous that I was not going to get the job because I just don't know anything about basketball. And the first day, you know, and I think that just the honesty, I was like, yeah, I don't really know about basketball. And then Mike was like, yeah, I don't know anything about basketball either. They're like, oh, it's just like being okay with, this is just a person.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to get to know you. So we just started talking and then I never fought where the conversation went. So it's like if the conversation went to like, what's your favorite smoothie flavor? Because I had a smoothie right before I went in there. And I remember being like, I just had a smoothie. It was delicious. You know, and it was like, we talking about smoothies now, you know, following that and then connecting. Because that's really what the room is anyway. It's just you talking to other people.
Yeah. It is always so interesting that these interviews, you know, they're so nerve-wracking because you're like, oh my God, I gotta interview. And then the actual content of you're like, oh snap, they're gonna ask me about like structure and this kind of stuff or whatever. I don't know what I thought my first interview was like. And then of course it was just, and every interview since that for every room has always just been conversational. And it's always just been, can we talk? Can we talk? Are you somebody that I could sit in a room with for a long time and shoot the shit?
Yeah.
Basically. And I actually think it's a legitimate litmus test of whether or not you're going to enjoy being in that room. So
yeah, because it's almost like in a way you're kind of interviewing them too.
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously when you first start, you're like, I just want a job. But like now when I go on interviews, I'm kind of like, do I like this person? You know, do I want to work with
exactly.
this person? Because you're like, I'm going to be with this person every day. All night.
Yeah.
And doing the most personal thing in the world, like, which to me is writing. Writing to me is so intimate, especially when you like, you ever like write with somebody and you're like on the blank screen and you're like typing dialogue.
It's vulnerable as fuck.
You're like hearing this. So that's how you think dialogue goes. It's like you're cooking with someone for the first time.
It's very
like,
vulnerable.
Yeah. It's like that shit is like, you don't want to just do that with anybody. You are just kind of figuring out, okay, are we cut from the same cloth? Do we like the same shows? That's a huge thing. Like,
absolutely.
It seems so on the nose, but it's like, if I go in an interview and the showrunner is like, my favorite show is like The Simpsons, I'm pretty much, okay, we're going to work well together.
I love that.
We have the same taste immediately. Yeah. But if they're like, oh, I like Frasier, I'm like, oh, I don't watch that shit. So like, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to work out.
I want to switch gears a little bit and ask you about anxiety because we both connected in the past over our struggles with anxiety, being writers, creatives with anxiety. And I actually think so many creatives struggle with anxiety.
Yeah.
And overthinking. Can you talk a little bit about what it's been like navigating Hollywood as an anxious person?
It's been a nightmare. I'm like, I think like this job is like the most unstable job I've ever like seen in my life. Like we're starting this year off right now. What is it? January? It's February 1st. I have no idea what this year is going to look like for me. Like I have no idea. And I have to just sit with that. And on one hand, it's exciting, you know, but when you deal with anxiety, it's not that fun because there's excessive worry. One of the things that I think is really funny, or I talked to my therapist about, is like, I think our brains, because we're good writers, like knows how to do it. Like we're actually good at our anxiety. The anxiety person in our brain is like really good at catastrophizing because they have all this skill set. Like they went to like film school. And they're like, I'm gonna show you the worst version of how your life is gonna go with all the information I have, and I'm gonna do it in the most entertaining way for you, so you can see how this movie would play out.
That is so.
I'm dealing with it. You know, with therapy is helping, and I highly, you know, and just full support of that. Like it was definitely a new thing for me. I just started doing it a couple years ago. You know, I take medication and stuff, but one of the biggest things that helped me is trying to constantly be working on something other than the thing I'm working on. Because I'm like, this industry is just sort of like, you don't have any control. Even a show that you're working on, which feels so stable, where you're like, oh, I have a job. It's like, I remember working at New Girl, which is a very popular show, and just having no idea if we were going to get another season to the last minute. I'm talking like, it was like the day before. I'll never forget this. It was like every show was getting renewed, and they were like, the word on the street was just like, it ain't happening. And I'm like, fuck, because I'm like, I spent all my money. Like, I don't know, like all my little staff writer money was gone. I had nothing in a bank account. I was like, oh man, I'm going to have to get a job, like go back to work. And then I feel like I could tell this story because it's so long ago. But what I heard is that Liz and the producers just like walked up in the network and just like fought for one more season and just like got one more, just like 8 episodes too, like not even a lot. And I came back for that, and I just like, wow. I was like, whew, that was close. You know, it's just like you just don't know to the last minute, and you're like, we have no power over this shit. And I think that creates a lot of anxiety, just career-wise, but also in the room, it's like tenfold, because the room to me is almost like a microcosm of high school. It's like you're trying to be cool, and you don't want to say things that make you seem like lame or weird, but you also want to be vulnerable and honest. That causes a lot of anxiety of just like, did these people like me? Like,
Absolutely.
am I annoying? It's like a social experiment. Put like these 7 to 8 people in a room together, and you're supposed to come up with funny ideas together. It's insane.
Absolutely. And inevitably, you know, there will be some part of the room where people are like pretty social, and then the other half of the room are like pretty introverted and not people who would really be in a nonstop social setting all day if they had the choice. I think it is very much a microcosm of high school. I love that analogy. I think that's like really real.
Yeah, it was like even the lunch thing, like we would have lunch together.
Yeah.
I was so nervous that I just wouldn't eat, and I would like take my lunch because I didn't know anybody. Like that's the other thing too, especially being Black, you know, we haven't really talked about that with the exception.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about being Black. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's talk about that elephant, because you know most of the shows I worked on, it was like either 1 or 2 Black people in that room. Mm-hmm. One of the things about that though is that people kind of know each other, and then you're like, how do they know each? I don't know any of y'all. Like I've never seen y'all before. You really come in feeling like a stranger. When I first started, I had to be like so nervous to talk. I wouldn't even eat lunch. I would just take it to the office and eat it.
Aww.
Like that scene from Mean Girls where she like eats in the toilet, you know?
In the toilet, yeah.
But my office roommate I feel like he was getting mad because I kept leaving the food in there. There was just like all this gross food in the office because I would forget that I like put it in there and never ate it.
Yeah.
Because it's like cool kids, especially you come into a show that's like been on the air for a long time. Like these people are like family, and you're like walking into it as a new person. It's very hard, and you're like trying to be, how do I make friends, but without trying too hard?
Yeah.
I got to be cool. I got to be like, come in, like, I don't give a fuck, but also I want to do the job well. It's like such a weird balance, but
it is.
It works out because most rooms, hopefully you have a nice group of people you work with. You become close friends with them too.
Absolutely.
You know?
I did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
My first room, I ate in my office by myself. I was very nervous. I was one of 2 Black people.
Yeah.
I was the only staff writer, though. I think the other Black girl was a higher level than me.
Oh,
we didn't really connect that much, and I just still kind of felt really alone. And I think that particular room kind of bred that thing where it was like a little bit you're on your own.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it really bred a lot of camaraderie in general. So I don't think it was about, 2 Black girls pitted against each other. It was just like, it was a lot of you're on your own kind of feeling.
Yeah.
I think being Black in the room was tough. It was tougher before. It feels slightly easier now. In the last like 2 years, maybe, I've been in rooms where I'm not the only Black person. Like like my last 3 jobs were like Last OG, Black Lady Sketch Show. I did Punch Up on set for them. And then Grand Crew. And these have all been majority Black shows, or at least they've been majority Black shows as I've been on them. So there was definitely that letting down my guard a little bit because previously in the room, like my previous shows, you know, on Hoops, I was the only Black person. And I think People of Earth, maybe I was like one of 3.
Yeah.
It wasn't that bad. The room, I feel like, just like you said, it's a microcosm of high school. I think it's also a microcosm of America.
Yeah.
You know, and America is racist. And America has structural racism in its workplace. And I think a lot of sexism as well, because a lot of these rooms are run by men.
Yeah.
So there have been times where I've been the only woman in a room,
Yeah.
which is weird. There was more than one show where I was the only Black person, but there's always this feeling during those times that like, I mean, something would be said that I don't think is great.
Yeah.
And there's just this feeling of like, how do I address this? Is it something I even care to address?
Right.
You know, is this a hill I want to die on? Or like, am I just going to keep my peace and keep it moving not be the voice of Black people today?
It's like, you just want to sometimes just do the work and go home and not like have to like start a revolution in there. But I also like, there's times where you're just like, oh, I have to like say something because this is not okay. But then you're like, the thing about writers' rooms are like, there's this unspoken rule that's like, you kind of need to be supportive of everybody's idea. Like you shouldn't really say no to an idea. It's kind of like a little awkward because like, on one hand, the way to do this job is to basically build on what's going on and not be a wet blanket, essentially. And you're like, but sometimes you want to be like, just real quick, Black people don't do that. Just to kind of, But that's also the kind of thing that, from their perspective, it's like, oh, this writer just kind of stopped the flow of the room.
Yeah,
you feel like you're kind of like being disruptive almost. But at the same time, there's so many times you see stuff on TV, you're like, how did this happen? And you're like, oh, probably because that person didn't feel like putting their job on the line to like say anything.
Yeah.
And then they shouldn't have to, you know?
Absolutely.
It's like, but at the same time, I'm like, I have every version of that of experience where like I had really great showrunners who were white who were like, if I had an issue, they would totally hear me out and like listen and be cool with it. But then I've had the other version of that too. At the end of the day, it's like, as a person with anxiety and mental health stuff, it's like, I'm really just trying to get through the day and not have any, I just personally also just hate conflict as a human. So I'm like, it's hard for me to like be in a state of conflict a lot. So I try to like get through it without dealing with that. But sometimes you just can't. But it's just crazy.
Yeah, it's a really fine line to walk because it also feels like, of course, I want the room to be an open dialogue kind of place where people don't have to feel like they have to censor themselves. But then sometimes somebody might say something that I was like, oop, should have censored. Should have censored that. Now it's like, I'm really nervous about the rest of your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because now we've been working for a while. So we almost kind of worked through that. We started at a time before things got a little more like progressive and wokeness. So now it's like almost we're like swung the other way where like, now I'm in rooms, I feel like people are not being as honest as they could be for fear of getting in trouble.
Yeah.
And this is my opinion. Sometimes I feel like it can hurt their writing because like we're not really being honest about these characters.
I agree.
Just because this character is behaving this way doesn't mean you think that this is right, right? But it's like we won't even pitch that idea because it's like, oh, well, if we pitch that, then that's saying that we support that. And I'm like, no, like this is how humans act. People still act like this.
Yeah, people discriminate all the time. And I agree that sometimes the over-censorship and the over-policing of your own ideas and thoughts and just like so much fear of saying anything, I think really hurts the room.
Yeah.
Because like you just said, like things have changed so much since we started and they really have.
Yeah.
I feel much more empowered now to speak up if I do feel like something is wrong. Like I feel like people will have my back in ways that I don't think that I felt that previously. And I feel like all this is just a normal change, you know, like change takes time. And hopefully at some point we'll get to the place where we trust each other enough as a society. Once again, I feel like it's a microcosm of society. Yeah. You know, like there's a lot of distrust. There's a lot of feeling that we can't say what we really feel. And I feel like hopefully over time, as we incorporate these new changes and these new ways of being, that like we're just more open to just being honest and we trust each other with being like, hey, you just said something really fucked up. I think that's fucked up. And then the person can say, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it was fucked up. Can we move forward?
It's not indicting your entire character.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not, you're not getting canceled now. And I hate the term canceled, but like, whatever, I'm just going to use it because that's what we're using. But it's like, it's not about like shutting people out. It's about like bringing people along with you as we change, as we grow, you know, and building that trust. But I think that's just going to take time.
Especially depending on the show, like that conversation can be in the show.
Yeah.
One of the things that I feel like happens a lot is like, it's almost like everybody in the room, we all have the same point of view sometimes lately. Like
Yeah.
It's like we all feel the same way about Karen Bass. But it's like, or for example, like I'm very religious. Like I go to church and shit, and like I believe in God, and that's just not that popular in Hollywood. Like most people are secular, or they are religious and they don't talk about it. But that's like a part of the country that's not really being represented in the writer's room.
I think so.
And I feel like, oh, I don't even want to talk about it because I don't want to come off like this real religious nut or something. And it's like, that's a weird feeling when it's like I'm actually hiding a version of myself in a place to sort of like talk about a show, and we're pitching on a show that's about an experience that we all live. So it's like, this isn't really honest yet. So I think that's something that I'm curious about. But I agree with you. I think this is just like the growing pains of this change that is like, are ultimately a net positive, which is things are better and we are like in a better place. But I'm curious about being in a showrunner position and seeing if I ever get to lucky enough to be a showrunner.
I think you will.
I'm curious about the hiring process and seeing how unique I would make my room, like in terms of spectrum of point of view, as opposed to like, okay, if this person doesn't believe what I believe or about life or how life should go, then they shouldn't. I don't want to work with them. But it should be like, I want to have someone from Montana who has no connection to my experience in Atlanta, but we connect on something. And that perspective makes the TV show better or whatever it is we're working on. Anyway.
I mean, I think specifically because you have this different worldview and this different experience, it's even more important that you become a showrunner. I think you will become a showrunner at some point. I think you're very talented. I think you work really hard. And I think that that's what leads to being a showrunner. So
we'll see.
You're the best, Lamar. You're also like one of the most vulnerable Black men I've ever talked to in my life. Clearly, therapy has done wonders. So amazing. I don't know if it's therapy or if that's just how you are.
I've always been like that. Like sometimes I'm like too good at therapy where I'm like, I feel like, man, I shouldn't be telling her everything. Like, let me hold some shit back because I feel like it's like too easy for her sometimes. And I'm like, I gotta make her work a little harder to get to. She's like, I can immediately like, this is what my mom did to me. And she's like, got it. Well, that was easy.
Is your therapist Black?
Nah, she's Iranian.
Oh,
she's
cool.
like Iranian, which is cool. She's like, we connect. A lot of my issues are rooted in religion, of course, obviously.
Interesting.
And we have a very similar religious upbringing, which is very helpful. You know, this is interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, I grew up like super religious, but now I'm like all over the place now. But something I'm very fascinated by, which is crazy. Hope we can make a show about that. Let's make a show about church.
Well, just so I know, it had nothing to do with the show, but where are you right now in terms of religion?
Right now, I am practicing Buddhist. I do go to church sometimes just because I like being around religious people and like I like singing the songs. And so I kind of like am in this state of like, I believe in Judeo-Christian sort of like an understanding of the world. But I think from a lifestyle point of view, I kind of believe that there's this religion. I don't say I'm not part of this religion, but it's called Baha'i faith. And it's basically the concept I do connect with, which is this idea that there's one God, but like all these prophets and these messengers are coming from the same source, whether it was like Siddhartha or Jesus or Muhammad, and all these are coming from the same source, and they're just different ways of communicating the same message across the planet. That's probably what I ultimately believe. But if you're wondering what I do on a daily basis, is I just practice Zen meditation. That's the main thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a long answer, but I could talk about that shit all day. That's like a whole nother podcast. But I'm absolutely fascinated with it.
It really wasn't that long. I'm the absolute opposite. Like I grew up so religious and now I don't want hardly anything to do with it. But I have started reading up on Buddhism and I have like started getting really into meditation. So what's interesting is I find that like at some point, I don't know if it's a lot of writers, but like Buddhism seems to be, interesting to a lot of writers because our minds tend to be busy and it's one of the only ways that is proven to like really calm the mind. So it's been super helpful.
Like going to the earlier point about like not being precious about ideas is like huge. Non-attachment is like one of the biggest helpful things in the room because you're like this idea of like not being attached to things kind of makes you like, if your idea doesn't get in, it's kind of like, oh, I'm not really attached to anything anyway. So,
not being attached to outcomes.
That I think is very helpful.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So you've been such a wonderful guest, Lamar. I'm so grateful to have you on. I want to ask you just like one or two final questions.
Okay.
I think you answered one of these already, but what's something you wish someone had told you before you became a working writer?
Oh, that's a good one. I wish somebody would tell me to like not be intimidated by the showrunner. Don't be afraid of the showrunner. Like they really are just a writer, you know. And I don't mean to downplay what who they are, but think of them as another writer, you know, like that they write just like you. So like you talk to them in that way, even though they are your boss, but they are writers. And I think I wish I knew that because the showrunner would walk by, I'd be like I would literally get like my heart would drop when the showrunner walked by. I'd be so
Same.
scared, like. But it's like, you know, you start talking to them, it's like, oh yeah, they're basically you, just like later in life, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, they probably went through everything you went through, you know?
That's such a good point. I also find that the showrunner really wants to know what you think. And it's really hard to do that if you don't feel like you have a right to talk, I guess.
Yeah.
It's very, very helpful to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's also, so I wish someone told me, like, talk. Now that I'm like, you know, further along, it's like, you have one job, it's like to talk.
To talk. Yeah.
I wish someone told me that because it's like, you're not getting points for like, just chilling there. And in fact, it's probably upsetting them because they know how much money you make, you know? So it's like, I think that's a huge thing. Like, it's like talk as much as you can. Yeah. I mean, don't just talk for talk's sake, but I wish someone told me like, oh yeah, just pitch a lot.
What's something you want to tell aspiring writers? Like, if there's one thing you could tell them.
I would say try to write what you want to see on TV. I try to keep that always in my head when I'm writing anything. I'm like, I watch a lot of TV and I try to write what I want to see, what I would watch, not so much what I think the industry wants from me, but I'm like, what would I actually watch? I think that's always been helpful because if you're someone who watches TV, you probably have good taste, you know, so you probably know what, you know, you would watch. If you wouldn't watch it, then don't write it, I guess, is what I would say. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll think of something better. That was all right. That was all right advice.
Send an email.
Yeah, no snitching. I don't know.
No, that was great. Lamar Woods, thank you so much for coming to the show. Much appreciated.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. That was fun.
Lamar is just the best. He's totally right that this podcast sounds like an NPR show, and I didn't hear it before, but I totally hear it now. So I realized after listening to this episode that Lamar asked a great question at the beginning of the interview, and I didn't give him a very satisfying answer, or at least I don't feel like I gave him a very satisfying answer. So I wanted to try and give a better answer now. Lamar asked me why I decided to make this podcast, and it's true. I have been doing a version of this podcast in our mentor sessions at the Working Writer School, which is a career-focused online course and community I started for screenwriters who are ready to break into TV. And it's true, the mentor sessions are what gave me the idea for the podcast. But the reason I started the Working Writer School is because I want to empower writers and creatives in the TV industry. I want writers to feel in control of their careers so that they have the space to be creative and the energy to put their work out into the world. And if you're wondering where this is coming from, it's coming from my own experience. I had zero knowledge about the industry when I entered Hollywood. I didn't know how to work with my managers and agents. I didn't understand what their jobs were. And if I'm being real, I didn't really know what my job was either. I was naive and just happy to be there. And I noticed that I wasn't the only one. A lot of my writer friends didn't know anything either. And at certain times, I even felt like the industry preferred that I was naive because then I'm not asking any questions, I'm not pushing back, and I'm doing as I'm told. But ultimately, Hollywood is a business. And if we're not knowledgeable about that business, it puts us as a creative in a very vulnerable position. TV writing looks fancy on the outside, but it's still a job. And I think writers should be trained to be screenwriters just like you'd be trained to do any other job. And I think that this specific training will make for a better experience in the writer's room. It'll make for a better experience in LA as you navigate Hollywood and make for more knowledgeable and empowered writers overall. So thank you, Lamar, for asking that wonderful question. That is my answer to that. That is the official answer to that for now. But if you want to check out Lamar's work, his album Wine Bars is available on Spotify. His film It's a Party is on Apple TV and Amazon Prime. And you can follow him on Instagram at Profmatic. That's PROPHMATIC at Profmatic. There's no way I could do this podcast alone. I'm grateful to have several wonderful people helping me put it together, including Brendan Burns, who did the music for the podcast, our editor, Justin Asher, and I get some additional production support from Maya Ricole and Nicole Edwards. If you'd like to show your support, follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at The Working Writer. That's it for now, folks. Until next time, get out there, get to work.